Welcome to the search bar, where we're exploring how to optimize your website for AI. So SEO has been crucial over the years, but now it's not enough just to optimize your website for search engines. It's essential to optimize your site for generative AI results. So with the rise of ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok and other platforms like that, there's a big need for you to get your website visible in those platforms, but also just in Google or sites like Perplexity. These search engines are integrating AI results as well. So Melissa's here with me today. And what are some things that people could do just to get their websites a little more visible in AI platforms like ChatGPT? So ideally, they can get a little more credibility in front of their target audience and get more visits to their site.
Yeah, so it's a question that comes up very often right now. And the easy answer is actually making sure that you're a top 10 ranking result for either Google or even Bing is really going to be kind of that first step. You want to make sure that you're allowing your site to be crawled by all of these bots from these different AI platforms. Although I will say, unless you've actually blocked them in the past, you probably haven't done anything to not have them come there. And they're really basing the same results kind of off of what Google and Bing is doing. So particularly for ChatGPT, OpenAI had a partnership with Microsoft. And so they are now, as they are bringing in actual search results, which is coming from web pages into ChatGPT, that is using kind of the backbone of what actually powers Bing. So that one in particular, if you want to make sure that you are showing up pretty well in ChatGPT, you want to start to monitor your Bing results more often. So what I like to say to clients is that Bing became relevant again, just not in the way Bing thought or hoped that it was going to become relevant.
Yeah, that's tough for some people, because I feel like for a lot of marketers, Bing kind of seems like a joke for the last, decade and a half. But it is a really great point. That makes a lot of sense. I love that advice you're giving, to simplify things. Just try to show up as high as you can in search results on Google or Bing.
Yeah.
Show up in the top 10. I mean, that's always great results. And it basically, if you want to show up in generative AI results, the fundamentals are the same as SEO. Write really great content, embed really great videos, make it unique and original with your own voice, make it relevant to your target audience, make sure your website loads really quickly, make sure the user experience is fantastic, make a page that people want to spend time on, that they're going to get value from, put really effective, relevant schema markup that's essential, as well. Often AI platforms really like that schema markup.
Yeah, and I would say especially when you're thinking of ChatGPT, since Bing is the background and the foundation of that one, Bing, out of all the search engines, like it does not like errors. Like Google will give you a little bit more grace on those items, Bing not so much. And some of the reasons for that is just like Bing doesn't put as much money into like crawling and like all the server side of what they're going to like go through, crawl all of that to actually store it down. And so like they don't update their cache or have their crawling as fast as Google. And so because of that, they have to prioritize how much time we're going to allow for crawling on a site or on a page, and how long we're going to either store that and how quickly we're going to update that, like from a cache perspective. And so if you have lots of errors on your site or on a page when they're crawling, they're basically going to say, I ain't got no time for you. Like I'm out, on to the next page, on to the next URL, the next link that's in this process. And so that's something that I would say, like particularly to help your case in a ChatGPT, you do want to make sure that your technical SEO is right on key and spot on there. That will help out a lot.
That's a great point. And that's something that at Blue Compass, our agency, that's something we do a lot, is monitor the errors and do, website audits all the time and figure out how many errors are on a website. And when we say errors, that can mean any number of things, but it can
things that a user can't see, things you're only going to see if you have a developer or an auditor like going through to find in the code
most of the time. But it also means things like your headings, like not having misordered headings. For instance, You put an H3 above an H2, or having multiple H1s, things like that too. Google considers an error more or less. And if you do a bunch of that sort of thing too, it can dock you. And so, yeah, basically having really clean code, it loads really fast, and just having your page, set up in a really good way. Smaller image sizes too. I mean, you don't have images on your website that are like 3 megs a piece, like that sort of thing. So yes, and that's a great point with Bing, because we don't think a lot about that, but as few errors as possible on your website.
The other thing that I would say when you're thinking about generative AI, remember that it is generative, meaning it's not, none of those platforms know the answer. It's actually a mathematical algorithm type of equation that goes through and says, if you ask it a question like, what is the best LED face mask? It's got to go out and like find all the different variations in which different people or different organizations around the web and socials have said, this is our favorite, or this is the best one. Then it knows, okay, here's what, because of how many times this one product has been referenced over and over as the answer to this question, that's what my answer as Perplexity or as ChatGPT, that's what my answer is going to be. The best one is this result. So if you are a retailer or you have a product or you are B2B, you will want to think about what I would call more of that digital PR approach. How often are you making sure that your product is referenced as an answer to a particular question that you want to make sure you show up for in multiple different places? So that way there are plenty of ways in which a generative AI bot will go through and say, hey, I continually see that this product or this item or this organization is the answer to this query or to this prompt so often that I know it's also the answer I should be giving. Because again, it comes down to mathematical, what's going to be the next keystroke to generate and formulate this sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having positive references to your product or service or brand on other websites and other platforms, things like that are helpful as well. And this might seem like a silly one, but there's something called the robot.txt file that every website has or should have. And this is a more technical thing, but we see websites launch sometimes and they have disavowed, search activity or AI activity on the website. And it's not going to rank in search results if you do that, and it's not going to rank in any AI results. So sometimes that's actually turned off, and that's a more technical thing, and you might need a developer to look at that. But make sure you haven't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, most of the time, if that's turned off, it's because it was by accident. That usually... It's like you're trying to hide the site while you're developing it, and then once you launch it, you have to go make sure that you have turned that on so that bots can come through and crawl it. But yes, especially if you're running like a WordPress or a Shopify or something where you've like used a out of the box type of CMS and you're building something out yourself, those are little things that if you're not a developer or an SEO, honestly, those are things you just wouldn't know to do. So it just depends on how big your organization is, or if you're, kind of handling this yourself and trying to get some SEO advice. Like those are little things you might not know to go and check for those different bots.
And stuff like this, all these technical things, this is one of the reasons why it can be dangerous to go with a cheap website solution, to go with a super inexpensive WordPress solution with some freelance guy or something like that. I'm not saying those sites are always bad, but sometimes they are, because you don't have a full team of technically skilled people behind it.
You might not be vetting the tech person.
Right. It's WordPress is cheap, but sometimes you get what you pay for, and there's a million plugins on it, and it's loading really slowly. And so, you get what you pay for. It's worth investing in a really, really solid website that has great SEO experts behind it, that, the copy is really solid, the design solid, the user experience solid. All of this technical stuff is working really, really well behind the scenes, because your SEO is only as good as the foundation and the structure you're building this on. You have to have a really strong foundation.
Yeah. I would even say another thing to consider when it comes to generative AI optimization is also thinking, looking a lot more at your social marketing habits. And I would say more from kind of a social strategy, like the organic side. What are you posting? How often are you referencing? Make sure you have a little bit of SEO mixed into that as well. And I will say there's a debate on that, on like who who understands that better. My perspective is like social search is a thing, and it doesn't have to be just mean that it's when people are searching within those social platforms, but it's also thinking about, are you using good keywords? Are you using good questions that you're answering within your social content? Because that's, your audience doesn't ask that in a vacuum only to Google. Your audience also thinks about those things when they go into other platforms like a Pinterest or a Snap or a TikTok, or even like YouTube. So YouTube's probably the second most searched engine that's out there. Most people don't think about YouTube as a search engine, but it's where a lot of searches happen. And so again, putting your strategy together, for generative AI, you also want to think about social, because that's another place that they can actually crawl. Most people don't realize that bots crawl all of those social platforms when they have open public profiles, and that can then send information over again to help generate answers within a ChatGPT or a Perplexity, like any of those AI engines.
Yeah, I always think of it as, your website is the number one place that you want your audience to be, other than maybe directly in your office. It depends. But your website is where people can learn your story. They can learn about your organization. They can read everything. They can watch videos. They can experience what you want them to experience. We had a conference the other day here, and we had a bunch of clients and organizations in, and we were talking about websites, and someone asked, like, how long do you want someone to be on your website? Mm-hmm. And I said, forever. You don't ever want anyone to leave your website. Like, you want people to be there, so they can learn about you and hear your side of the story and become familiar with what you do and what you believe and your products and services and things like that. So the website is where you want people to be, but it would be a mistake to only focus on one thing, which is your website. Like you said, there's YouTube. Invest some time in there, and that can also send people to your websites. Invest some time in social, and that can also send people to your website. Invest time in Google My Business or Google Business Profile, as it's now called, in different directories. Like, there's so many different platforms where it does make sense for your brand to have some sort of a presence, not just to send people back to your website, but also to send signals to Google and other search engines and other AI platforms saying, yeah, we're relevant, we're consistent throughout all these platforms, and we're doing everything we can to add value to the user.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I would maybe argue a little bit, though, is as much as you want people to come to your website, it really depends on your KPIs and what you actually want your users to do. If you need traffic from a commercial or an advertising perspective, that's one thing where you do absolutely want them to come back. If you are doing something from a B2B perspective, you don't necessarily have to have them come back to your website to influence them to say, like, your organization is the best. So I look at social posts or YouTube videos or things within Pinterest. Those sometimes I can get what I need done for the value of my business or the goals that I'm working for some of my clients, just by having those, rather than saying I have to have them come back to my website.
Well, yeah, certainly. That's a great point. Of course, especially if you're selling like products where they can do it directly on other platforms and things like that.
Yeah. So like if you're the direct like retailer, you know what I mean? You want them to come back and buy from you. But if you are the wholesaler and you're wanting to work now directly with your, directly to consumer rather than having to go through all those retailers, like that strategy might change where it's like, I don't care if they buy it on Walmart. I am totally happy if they just buy it straight off of Instagram.
Yep. Great point.
All of that to say, trying to rank better within a generative AI experience is basically the new way of SEO. It's just a lot more difficult. There's a lot more complicated processes now, and you want to make sure that you're showing up in lots of different areas, not just focusing on one web page or just your website as a way to help get into those ranking results within a generative AI experience. It takes a lot more effort, and it's multi-channel.
Hope that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like the video and subscribe, which helps the channel a lot. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.